Welcome back, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on the Kitab-i-Iqan. In this section, we're covering paragraphs 134 through 140 of the Kitab-i-Iqan. His Holiness Baha'u'llah addresses the nature of ascendancy, power, and authority in the chosen ones of God, and explains that such terms cannot be literally interpreted. His Holiness Baha'u'llah then refers to the martyrdom of Imam Husayn as an example and explains how that matchless soul, where no warrior could be found on earth more excellent and nearer to God than him, was outwardly seized and martyred by his enemies. Dear friends, we will share with you some following key points from these paragraphs. The sovereignty of the Qayyam cannot be interpreted as earthly supremacy and temporal power, else it will be impossible to explain the meaning of many verses in the Quran. The martyrdom of Imam Husayn clearly illustrates that the chosen ones of God are outwardly seized and subjugated by the enemies of God. Imam Husayn has a special station in Shia Islam. As Baha'u'llah testifies, there was none to equal or to match him in the world. And friends, this is a quote reference from His Holiness Baha'u'llah in the Kitab-i-Iqan, page 126. And the loneliness and the shame inflicted on Husayn at the time of his martyrdom should not cast doubt on the merit of sacrifice. In paragraphs 134 and 135, Baha'u'llah illustrates that the sovereignty of the Qayyam cannot be interpreted as earthly supremacy and temporal power, else it will be impossible to explain the meaning of many other verses from the Quran. His Holiness Baha'u'llah then cites three examples from the Quran. First, and verily our host shall conquer. And friends, this is from the Quran, chapter 37, verse 173. Second, fain would they put out God's light with their mouths, but God hath willed to perfect his light, albeit the infidels abhor it. And this is from the Quran, chapter 9, verse 33. And the third example is from the Quran is, he is the dominant above all things. And this is from the Quran, chapter 11, verses 18. In these verses, God states that his army is always victorious, and his light cannot be extinguished. The army of God is none other than his manifestations and their followers. The manifestations of God often do not have physical dominion, and their followers are usually severely persecuted by their enemies. Hence, these statements can be misconstrued if they are interpreted as the physical victory and dominion of the army of God. In order to illustrate that the dominance mentioned in these verses is not physical, Baha'u'llah refers to the martyrdom of Husayn as an example from Islamic history. Husayn was the third Imam of Shia Islam and the son of Ali. This occurred in Karbala, the land of Taf, on the 10th day of Muharram, AH 61, October AD 680. Karbala is located in central Iraq, on the edge of the Syrian desert. In paragraph 136, His Holiness Baha'u'llah states that if the verse quoted, "And verily our host shall conquer," is literally interpreted as physical victory, then it does not apply to the chosen ones of God. For example, Husayn, whose heroism was manifest as the sun, was physically seized and martyred by his enemies. Similarly, a literal interpretation of the verse, "Fain would they put out God's light with their mouths, but God hath willed to perfect his light, albeit the infidels abhor it," since seemingly people can extinguish the light of God in the early days of every dispensation. This conclusion was significantly true for the dispensation of the Bab, since he was martyred and his followers were persecuted. His Holiness Baha'u'llah then explains in paragraph 137 that the terms ascendancy, power, and authority have meanings different from what people imagine. For instance, the outward manifestation of such power was inherent in the blood of Husayn that dropped on the ground of Karbala. It gave that dust such potency that it could heal the sick and protect people's houses. Another evidence of the true ascendancy, power, and authority of Husayn is the large number of people from different corners of the earth who have made and continue to make a pilgrimage to the site of his martyrdom. This phenomenon contrasts with the time when he was martyred alone and no one there to bury his body. Husayn was the second son of Ali and Fatimah, the daughter of Muhammad. He was born in Medina in AD 626. Husayn and his brother Hassan were the only two grandsons of Muhammad. There are many Islamic traditions describing the special love of Muhammad for Hassan and Husayn. Before his death, Ali, the first Imam, who had also become the fourth Caliph, appointed Hassan as his successor and to be the next Caliph. However, the supreme leader of the Muslims, the Muawiyah, the founder of the Umayyad dynasty, challenged Hassan's claim to the title. Hassan stepped aside and submitted to the Muawiyah's caliphate in 661. At the time, Husayn, who was the younger brother, followed Hassan and accepted Muawiyah's leadership. After Hassan's death, Husayn continued to submit to Muawiyah, but he did not recognize Yazid, Muawiyah's son. On the death of Muawiyah, Husayn left Medina for Mecca. After arriving in Mecca, he received letters from the Muslims of Kufa expressing their support for him and inviting him to rebel against Yazid. Husayn set off for Kufa with a small group of his companions, including men, women, and children. Husayn never reached Kufa, as he and his companions were massacred by the Umayyad army in Karbala. Umayyad was the governor of Medina. This is how Marzia Gale describes the martyrdom of Imam Husayn. Dying, Ali appointed his son Hassan as Imam, and he was poisoned. Then Husayn, the third Imam, with a little band of followers, including women and children, was betrayed by the men of Kufa, who had sworn allegiance to him and asked him to come to them and be their ruler. He and his party were surrounded in the sand and cut off from the river, so that they would die of thirst, singly and in bands. His men were butchered. Husayn's horse was felled. Weak from thirst, Husayn sat on the ground. Soldiers came up to kill him, but none dared. His little son was crying, so he took it in his arms. An arrow killed it. He laid it on the earth, saying, "We are from God, and to him do we return." Then he rose and went toward the Euphrates, and bent down to drink. An arrow struck him in the lips, and the blood streamed out. The soldiers surrounded him, and slowly shot him down, till from many wounds he fell and died. They rode their horses over his body, and severed his head, and put it upon a lance. As the enemy general reported to the caliph, their bodies were dishonored and naked, their clothes mixed with the sand, their faces stained with the earth, and the winds blew upon them. When the head of Husayn, grandson of Muhammad, was brought in to the Kufa, the governor there struck the mouth with his cane. There was an old Muslim present, and he wept and cried out, "Alas, on these lips have I seen the lips of the Prophet of God." Gibbon comments on this crime that stirred up the conscience of the Muslim world to such a point that the Persians still 2 months out of the year wear mourning clothes for Husayn. In a distant age and climate, the tragic scenes of the death of Husayn will awaken the sympathy of the coldest reader. And friends, this was from Marzia Gale, 6 Lessons on Islam, page 33. Imam Husayn has a special station in Shia Islam, as testified by Baha'u'llah in paragraph 135. There was none to equal or to match him in the world. His martyrdom is considered by Baha'u'llah as a sacrifice offered by Muhammad, so that his steadfastness in the faith of God and his detachment from all else but him may be demonstrated unto men. The purpose of God, moreover, was to sacrifice him as a ransom for the sins and iniquities of all the peoples of the earth. And this is from His Holiness Baha'u'llah, Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, page 75. For the same reason, Abraham was commanded by God to sacrifice his son Ishmael, and Jesus Christ was sacrificed. In addition, Shia Muslims expected the return of Husayn soon after the coming of the Ghayyam. Baha'u'llah explicitly states that he has fulfilled this prophecy. He explains, "Consider the eagerness with which certain peoples and nations have anticipated the return of Imam Husayn, whose coming after the appearance of the Ghayyam hath been prophesied in days past by the chosen ones of God, exalted be his glory. That hour is now come." And friends, this is from the Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, page 12. This further illustrates the high station occupied by Husayn. Husayn had an irresistible charm and unyielding spirit. According to Abul Qasim Fayzi, Husayn, in whatever condition he might find himself, would ceaselessly utter words of praise and adoration, whether in happiness and prosperity or in the midst of misfortune and adversity. He would offer thanksgiving to his Lord, and he often expressed particular gratitude for being a descendant of the Apostle of God and enriched by the bounty of the Quran. He also thanked his Creator for the members of his family and his friends who, though few in number, demonstrated the most exalted spirit of faith, devotion, and steadfastness. And friends, this is from Abul Qasim Fayzi in his book, The Prince of Martyrs, page 32. In paragraph 139, His Holiness Baha'u'llah warns that the loneliness and the shame inflicted on Husayn at the time of his martyrdom should not cast doubt on the merit of sacrifice. Husayn's soul is now immortal and liveth the life of God. Such souls are the exemplars of sacrifice. Abdul-Baha refers to sacrifice as a mystery. He explains that there are two kinds of sacrifice, the physical and the spiritual. And friends, this is a reference by Abdul-Baha in the Promulgation of Universal Peace, page 449. He then explains the reality of sacrifice. By considering the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, he defines 4 meanings for sacrifice. When Christ appeared, he knew that he must proclaim himself in opposition to all the nations and peoples of the earth. He knew that mankind would arise against him and inflict upon him all manner of tribulations, notwithstanding his knowledge of what would befall him. He arose to proclaim his message, suffered all tribulation and hardships from the people, and finally offered his life as a sacrifice in order to illumine humanity, gave his blood in order to guide the world of mankind. Friends, this is one of the meanings of sacrifice. And the reference here is the Abdul-Baha in the Promulgation of Universal Peace, page 450. Abdul-Baha then defines the second meaning of sacrifice. He, His Holiness Christ, said, "I am the living bread which came down from heaven." It was not the body of Christ which came from heaven. He meant that the perfections which he showed forth were divine perfections, that the blessings within him were heavenly gifts and bestowals, that his light was the light of reality. He said, "If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever." That is to say, whosoever assimilates these divine perfections, which are within me, will never die. Whosoever has a share and partakes of these heavenly bounties I embody will find eternal life. He who takes unto himself these divine lights shall find everlasting life. How manifest the meaning is. And friends, this is also His Holiness Abdul-Baha in the Promulgation of Universal Peace, pages 450 going to 451. For the third meaning of sacrifice, Abdul-Baha uses the imagery of a seed and the tree that has grown from it. If you plant a seed in the ground, a tree will become manifest from that seed. The seed sacrifices itself to the tree that will come from it. The seed is outwardly lost, destroyed, but the same seed which is sacrificed will be absorbed and embodied in the tree, its blossoms, fruit, and branches. Christ embodied in the tree. Christ outwardly disappeared. His personal identity became hidden from the eyes, even as the identity of the seed disappeared. But the bounties, divine qualities, and perfections of Christ became manifest in the Christian community, which Christ founded through sacrificing himself. And friends, this is from Abdul-Baha in the Promulgation of Universal Peace, page 451. As for the fourth meaning of sacrifice, Abdul-Baha explains, it is the principle that a reality sacrifices its own characteristics. Man must sever himself from the influences of the world of matter, from the world of nature and its laws. For the material world is the world of corruption and death. On the other hand, man must acquire heavenly qualities and attain divine attributes. That is to say, man must sacrifice the qualities and attributes of the world of nature for the qualities and attributes of the world of God. And friends, again, this is from Abdul Baha in the Promulgation of Universal Peace, page 451. In paragraph 140, His Holiness Baha'u'llah states that if he wishes to reveal a glimmer of the mysteries of the martyrdom of Imam Husayn and its results, the pages of the Kitab-i-Iqan would not be sufficient. Baha'u'llah has unfolded some of those mysteries in the lengthy tablet of visitation that he has revealed at a later stage for Imam Husayn. This tablet has not been officially translated into English. Mr. Hooper Dunbar provides the following summary of the tablet. He, Baha'u'llah, refers to his Imam Husayn martyrdom as the most great calamity and a grievous affliction. Through Husayn's martyrdom, the soul of the chaste one, Fatimah, was melted, and the Apostle Muhammad lamented. The inmates of the supreme paradise cried out, and the realities of existence were consumed. Baha'u'llah refers to Husayn as the prince and king of martyrs, the pride and beloved of martyrs. Through him, the light of detachment shone forth in the world, and the near ones were adorned with the ornament of piety. If it were not for Husayn, the injunction of the B and E would not have been manifested. The choice wine would not have been unsealed. The bird of divine testimony would not have spoken amongst the followers of diverse beliefs. By him, Baha'u'llah states, the mystery of true knowledge became manifest in every land, and the light of certitude shone forth from the heaven of testimony. Through him, the doors of divine grace were unlocked to the world. For 9 pages, Baha'u'llah continues to extol the wonders and effects of Husayn and his great sacrifice. This, friends, is a reference in Mr. Hooper Dunbar's book, A Companion to the Study of the Kitab-i-Iqan, pages 148 to 149. Thank you, dear friends.